Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your home for everything that goes bump in the dark. We're the place where your fan stories come to life, one chilling tale at a time. Today's story comes from Stephanie, and it's titled Bedtime Battle. But before we dive in, I've got a treat for you. Visit paranormalnightshift.com to claim your free copy of The Birth of Dimensional Desperado. It's the first ebook in our exciting new series featuring Buck Freeman, a fearless time-traveling investigator of paranormal mysteries. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let's jump into Stephanie's story, Bedtime Battle. Life overseas as a military spouse wasn't always easy. My husband's career meant long stretches of time away from home, leaving me to juggle the chaos of raising our two kids in a foreign country. At the time of this story, my son was about 2, maybe 3, just old enough to start doing that thing all kids seem to do, staring into empty corners, giggling at nothing, and having full-on conversations with people who weren't there. I'd laugh it off like most parents, chalking it up to his imagination or developmental quirks. But looking back, I realized that something far stranger was going on. It all started when my husband left for a 4-week training exercise. It wasn't our first time navigating his absence, but this time, something felt different. During the first week, we adjusted to the routine of him being gone. Me trying to keep the house running smoothly, the kids adjusting to missing their dad. But almost immediately, my son began waking up in the middle of the night, crying. At first, I assumed it was just separation anxiety. Maybe he missed his dad. Maybe the house felt too quiet or too big without him. By the second week, I noticed a pattern. It wasn't just random wake-ups. It was the same time every night. Like clockwork, around 2:30 a.m., my son would scream, his little voice echoing through the house, raw with fear. I'd rush to his room, pick him up, and try to calm him down, but it was like he wasn't fully awake. His eyes darted around the room, looking at things I couldn't see. Sometimes he'd point to a corner or glance up at the ceiling, his little body trembling in my arms. I'd hold him, whispering soothing words, until he finally settled enough to fall back asleep, though only in my bed, with the light on. Week 3 was when everything escalated. My son no longer cried. He screamed. His fear was palpable, almost contagious. He refused to go into his room if it was dark outside, and even during the day, he seemed uneasy in there. Bedtime became a battle, and his night terrors became so intense that I started dreading the night myself. I wasn't sleeping well, anticipating his cries, and the exhaustion began to wear on me. My patience was thin, my nerves frayed. Something wasn't right, and I could feel it in my gut. One night, around the 3rd week, I finally hit my breaking point. My son's screams had jolted me awake yet again, and as I stumbled into his room, bleary-eyed and desperate, I saw him standing in his crib, tears streaming down his face. He wasn't just scared, he was terrified. His tiny hands clutched the crib rail, his wide eyes fixated on something in the far corner of the room. I looked where he was looking, but of course there was nothing there, just the usual shadows cast by the soft glow of his nightlight. "Buddy, it's okay," I whispered, scooping him up. His body trembled against mine, and his little hands clung to my shirt. "No, Mommy," he sobbed, burying his face in my shoulder. "It's in here. It's here." My stomach twisted. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself he was just having another bad dream, but deep down, I knew this was something different, something I couldn't explain. That night, after another hour of trying to soothe him back to sleep, I snapped. Not in anger, but in sheer desperation. I didn't know what else to do. I carried him back to his room, opened the window wide, and stared out into the darkness. The air was still, heavy, like the calm before a storm. I don't know what came over me, but I felt a surge of defiance. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the primal instinct to protect my child. Whatever it was, I pointed out the window and spoke with more authority than I knew I had. "Whoever or whatever is here," I said, my voice low and firm. "You have to leave. This is my house, and you're not welcome. You're keeping us up, scaring my baby, and I've had enough. Get out." The room seemed to hold its breath for a moment, as if waiting to see what would happen. Then, almost in response, the nightlight flickered, the bulb dimming for a split second before glowing brightly again. A sudden gust of wind blew in through the open window, rustling the curtains and carrying with it the faintest scent of something I couldn't quite place. Sage, maybe, or something earthy and ancient. The air felt lighter, less oppressive. And just like that, my son stopped crying. He pulled away from me, his tear-streaked face calm for the first time in weeks. Without a word, he slid out of my arms, climbed into his crib, and curled up under his blanket. His breathing slowed, steady and peaceful. He was asleep within minutes. I stood there, dumbfounded, staring at the now quiet room. Whatever tension had been there was gone. The corner my son had been so afraid of felt empty, normal. I closed the window, pulled the curtains shut, and tiptoed out of the room, half expecting the crying to start again. But it didn't. For the first time in weeks, my son slept through the night. The next morning, he woke up cheerful, as if nothing had ever been wrong. He played happily, ate his breakfast, and didn't once mention being scared or seeing it. And just like that, life went back to normal. To this day, I don't know what was in that room or why it chose to torment my son, but I do know this. Whatever it was, it heard me that night. It listened, and it left. Sometimes I wonder if it was tied to my husband being gone, like some void it tried to fill, or if it was something about the house or the land. I'll never have the answers, but I learned something important that night. Sometimes all it takes is a mother's love and a little stubborn courage to face the unknown. With that being said, Stephanie, thank you so much for your story. Remember, if you want to support the show, head on over to our Patreon page. Your contributions help us keep the lights on, the stories flowing, and the time traveler fueled up for his next adventure. But hey, if you can't support us financially, no worries. Just sharing the show with a friend or rating us on your favorite podcast platform goes a long way. And if you've got a spooky story of your own, we'd love to hear it. Share it with us right here on Paranormal Nightshift. You never know, your story might just become the next chapter in the Paranormal Time Traveler series and told here on the show. Until next time, keep your eyes peeled for the unexplained, your ears open for the unheard, and your minds open to the possibilities.